Welcoming Ambassador Joe DeTrani to the Cipher Brief studio, one of our most trusted sources on how all of these global issues impact, particularly China and North Korea. Joe, it's really nice to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us this weekend.
Well, great seeing you, Suzanne. Your team is doing great work.
Thank you so much. You know, the surprise nature of these strikes was one thing. I think we are getting a really good sense of how they're being viewed, not only in the U.S., but also a strong sense in the region. What I naturally am very interested in knowing is how are these strikes on these nuclear facilities in Iran being viewed by some U.S. adversaries, including North Korea, which has been sort of shaking the nuclear saber for a while, and they actually have nuclear weapons. Talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about that, Joe.
No, I think the North Koreans feel very good about their previous decision to have a clandestine, highly enriched uranium program. I think this validates everything that Kim Jong-il and now his son, Kim Jong-un, have been doing over the years. They had the agreed framework, the six-party talks joint statement, committed to complete verifiable denuclearization, but they were building a clandestine, highly enriched uranium program. That was their intent. It continues to be their intent, and I think this validates it. They feel very strongly that they need nuclear weapons as a deterrent. They've told us that very clearly, as a deterrent, but also to intimidate, also to be part of the equation, if you will. So yeah, I think this validates everything that North Korea's been doing over the years.
North Korea is very active with their testing systems. Obviously, during the first Trump administration, efforts by President Trump to directly engage with Kim Jong-un were not successful. They didn't lead to what the U.S. really wanted, which was for North Korea to completely denuclearize. So I'm curious, given that they are very prolific, I guess, if you will, in comparison in terms of their nuclear exercises, their missile exercises. A lot of these missiles can carry these warheads on them. How are you thinking about the response from North Korea to something like this? Will they see it as an opportunity where they need to flex more muscle?
No, I think they see this as an opportunity. I think this not only justifies what they've been doing over the years, but it also makes clear to the North Korean leadership they have to be self-reliant. They just can't rely on their allies, China and Russia. China and Russia weren't there for Iran. They're part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They just had recent joint military exercises and treaty obligations to each other on geopolitical issues. But China and Russia have their own issues. So I think this validates for North Korea that you have to be self-reliant. You can't give up your nuclear weapons, and you've got to be there. But let me add this. North Korea has always been very close to Iran. I mean, this goes back decades. Not only the ballistic missile program, but a lot of other unconfirmed programs, to include the nuclear assistance to Iran, to include building underground bunkers for Iran to conceal the Fordo facility. So North Korea is very much involved with Iran over the years, mainly for money. The question then has to be, how does North Korea move forward with Iran? If Iran reaches out to North Korea for assistance, hopefully it's not assistance with highly enriched uranium for dirty bombs. Hopefully it's not a nuclear weapon, but for assistance in a generic sense, certainly ballistic missile assistance. I think North Korea will be there, not only for the money, but also for the fact that they're causing the United States, the West, grief. We're being addressed in a very dogmatic way from Pyongyang, and this is something we have to watch very closely. That's why I am a believer in negotiations and dialogue with North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Joe, China has traditionally not really been enthusiastic about North Korea's nuclear program. China has really been a voice, I think, globally to try and deter other countries from having these nuclear capabilities. How is China looking at what's happening right now, and where are they seeing both challenges for their own agenda, but also opportunities?
You know, China is not happy with what's going on. They're not happy with North Korea's mutual defense treaty with the Russian Federation. They're not happy that North Korea has troops in Russia fighting the Ukrainians. I mean, they're providing a lot of military assistance. China's not happy with it, but you know, China can't do anything about it because this is North Korea working now with the Russian Federation, and obviously China is close to Putin, and Xi Jinping has that relationship. So this is part of the axis of authoritarian states. Part of that is certainly North Korea, part of that is certainly Iran. And I think it's the Iran-North Korea nexus, where North Korea becomes the outlier, where North Korea becomes the unpredictable player in this equation, because as you just said, I don't think China wants to see nuclear confrontation. I don't think China wants to see Iran with nuclear weapons. I totally agree with you. And I think Russia is sort of sitting on the side and saying, look, we have a war with Ukraine. We've got all these other issues here. But it's North Korea. That's the wild card. And I think that's a card they'll play.
Mm-hmm. So that's a great closing question, because the next question I was going to ask you is, well, what indicators are you going to be looking for that North Korea may be acting on some of the opportunity that it may see?
You know, we have to monitor North Korea very, very closely now, especially now, given the U.S. bombing of Fodor, given the conflict with Israel, given a lot of concern, the Ayatollah and the leadership in Iran feeling that the regime change may be the objective here. So there's going to be a lot. So I think Iran will be reaching out to countries like North Korea, because North Korea has provided all that assistance in the past, and they have the capability of doing it. So we have to monitor North Korea very closely to ensure that they do not provide Iran with capabilities, to include, if you will, and I'll go that far, to include highly enriched uranium and for dirty bombs and nuclear weapons, etc. But certainly in the missile side, where they can project power. So we have to monitor closely. Conversely, we also need to, and I think we see this with the South Korean government, reach out to North Korea in some way to re-engage with North Korea so that they understand there are red lines they cannot cross. Because if North Korea crosses some of those red lines, it would be catastrophic for the leadership in Pyongyang. They need to understand that. And that's why we need a dialogue with North Korea. And I think this is something the Trump administration is pursuing.
Joe, just one more final question. I could have 100 for you. But do you feel like after all of your engagement with North Korea, you are special envoy to six-party talks, you've followed North Korea's nuclear aspirations, how they created their program. You're one of the leading experts on this issue right now. Do you feel like the leadership in North Korea is ever going to understand on their own where those red lines might be? They've been communicated to them. Even when talks aren't going on actively, they must know what those red lines are. Do you think they're accepting it?
I think they know what the red lines are, because we've told them that many times. But Suzanne, over the past 4 years, certainly since the Hanoi summit in 2019, we've had no contact with North Korea. And their contact with the Russian Federation is really closer than ever before, even pre the implosion of the Soviet Union. So yeah, I think they need to be reminded of those red lines. They need to be reminded of the consequences for crossing those red lines. But indeed, in the context of things, I still believe North Korea wants a normal relationship with the United States, but on their terms, Suzanne. Accept us as a nuclear weapon state. We'll behave. We'll never use them offensively. But we've gone beyond that now. We've gone beyond that now. And we're not accepting them as a nuclear weapon state. That's very clear. And North Korea understands that. So they're going to persist and retain those nuclear weapons, but they're going to be as much of an outlier as possible and causes as much grief as possible until we acquiesce, because they eventually see us, truthfully in my view, caving on these issues, where we eventually do recognize them, as we did Pakistan and so forth. So they see us as sort of weak in that regard. But that's why dialogue with North Korea, reminding them of the consequences of crossing those red lines, what the consequences are, that's important.
Yeah. Joe, okay, just one more, and I promise this will be this will be the final one. But you mentioned something else, which is that the opportunity that North Korea may take to help Iran when it comes to at least enough nuclear materials to build a dirty bomb. Now, dirty bombs have always traditionally been associated with like terrorists. I mean, it's a more targeted use of a smaller nuclear weapon. It certainly doesn't have the lasting impact or the range as like a traditional nuclear weapon. But do you see, and I'm not trying to be alarmist here, but I'm just asking, I mean, you spent decades at the CIA, you are trained to think this all the way through. What might North Korea or Iran at this point be thinking in terms of like a tactical use of a dirty bomb? It seems to me that there would be no upside for them.
No, I mean, the consequences of a dirty bomb would be devastating, immense. Having said that, however, I think we have to look at the worst case scenario in all instances. And indeed, I don't even want to go there. But, Iran is a state supporter of terrorism. Iran has proxies that perpetrated terrorist acts. We saw the Khobar, we go back to Lebanon in 1983. So Iran has perpetrated some of these acts, and certainly North Korea has perpetrated some of these acts in 1988 when they took down a Korean airline with 115 passengers, all deceased. So yeah, we've seen some beyond the pale behavior on the part of Iran and North Korea. Now you put those two together, I don't think you can discount anything.
Yeah, you literally never know. Joe, thank you so much for your insights on this. I really appreciate it. It helps us really create some context around what we're seeing in the headlines and to understand it much, much better.
Thank you,
thank you so much, Ambassador Joe DeTrani, for joining us here in the Cipher Brief studio.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.